Hey everybody, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed, the television edition for, wow, it's October 7th already. Leaves are changing. And we are live, of course. And don't forget, of course, Matt Connarton Unleashed. We have both the television and the radio edition now 5 nights a week on IPM Nation on the live station at 11 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, we do a television edition every Wednesday live right here at 2 p.m. And we'll get right to our guests because we just met, but I think we're going to have a great conversation. Mr. Joe LaChance is here.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. The wonderful Mr. Hopwood recommended that I have you on and that
Thanks.
you stick around. And,
Happy to be here.
So tell us, well, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself
Sure.
and your current, are you a state rep
I
currently?
am.
Or? Okay.
I am State Representative Joseph LaChance. I represent Ward 1, which is Hillsborough 8 in Manchester.
Okay.
I was elected last year for my first term, so I'm going into my second session.
Okay.
Starting in January. I was born and raised right here in the live free or die state.
Yeah.
I was born up north. We moved down here right away. I grew up in the Manchester Hooksett area.
Yeah.
Graduated from Trinity High School. I joined the military shortly thereafter. Was in the United States Army. Married my high school sweetheart of 23 years, and we have
Wow.
2 beautiful children.
Good
One
for
that
you.
just graduated high school central, one that's in elementary school. I was a police officer for 10 years in Bedford part-time,
Wow.
and I'm a retired federal employee.
Okay. Wow.
And I am running for school board at large for the city of Manchester.
Okay.
There are 4 folks running for 2 positions. I'm working really hard for this. I have the time, I have the dedication, I have the drive, and I really want to work with the schools and the children and the city to get better communication. I mean, if you talk to the people of Manchester right now, the 3 or 4 things on their mind is the heroin epidemic,
Oh, yeah.
how bad our schools are, the crime rate, and it all starts with the schools. So I can bring a breath of fresh air. I can bring a new perspective. Compromise is my part of my makeup, and in order for this city to move forward, we need wholesale change on the boards. And I want to be part of that wholesale change, and I want to be part of this mission to change the direction of the city, because we're at a crossroads right now.
Now, you're a Republican, right?
I am. I'm a Republican.
Okay.
Now, one caveat.
I don't often hear Republicans use the C word, compromise.
Well, here's the deal, and I think it's important for your audience and for folks to realize that my first bid for state representative, I couldn't run till after I retired from federal service because of the Hatch Act, the federal law that you can't do it.
Right.
If you're a federal employee, you can't hold elective office at that level. But I ran as an independent. I went out the first time I ran as an undeclared because I truly am. Listen, I lean libertarian. On the social issues, I'm more of a Democrat. I'm more of a libertarian. On the fiscal issues, I am more of the Republican. So I had to pick a party because I did not win I lost by like 70 votes. It was very, very close that first election.
Yeah.
And I know if I would have had a tag, I probably would have gotten that certain population.
But to your credit, to run for something as an independent
I tried.
and to make it a close race.
Correct.
That's impressive.
And for folks like myself, and it sounds like us, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
That makes me happy because you know what? I'm not a rah Republican Party, everything, the platform. That's not, I'm rah for Manchester, for my family, for my city, for my state. What's good for us? Just because a Republican view of something, that might not be the right view. Just the Democrat. Listen, what's killing our parties right now? Extreme left, extreme right.
Absolutely.
And everything in between that's extreme.
Absolutely. I'm with you. Yeah.
If you can't compromise, you're not going to get the work of the people done.
Well, I was a registered Democrat up until the mid-2000s, and then I became an independent because, that's when I really started to notice this extremism that you talk about. And it really does exist in both parties. People talk about Republican extremism a lot, but there's definitely that same thing on the left. And I think we're seeing some of it bubbling to the surface now, like with Bernie Sanders and his his doing so well in the polls
Sure.
on the left. And then, so I became an independent. I was fed up. I have voted for members of both parties. When we moved to Manchester, because I've only been a Manchester resident since January, and when I registered to vote, I registered as a Democrat because there's some, well, I don't want to say pressure, but some people are encouraging me to run for something. And it's that same thing again. It's you know, I'm really an independent at heart. And, you know, I also very much like the way you described yourself. You know, I tend to be more with the Democrats on a lot of social issues, but with the Republicans on some fiscal issues. And I don't feel like I really comfortably fit in either party. But it's hard to run for something as an independent. So
it is hard. You made a point. It was. I felt almost vindicated, even though I didn't win that first time as an independent.
Yeah.
You know, we had worked so hard. We sent 300 letters out. I went door to door. I had to get all these verified, and we did it, and we got on the ballot.
Yeah.
You know, I just wish more people would realize that if we could work together, we can get things done. You know, I'm afraid for Manchester right now. I really am. And I think people, when it comes to the November 3rd election, A, you need to come out.
Right.
And B, you really need to be careful who you vote for on that ballot. If you are fine with the way everything is in this city right now, then go ahead and leave the same people in office.
Right.
You've got somebody I'm running against that's been in the school board for a couple sessions now. What's the major accomplishment? You know?
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not afraid to speak it the way it is, and I'll tell you, for school board, I won't take the benefits, the taxpayer-funded benefits, health benefits. I don't think a part-time school volunteer on a community board to better your community and your children should entitle to you and your family for health insurance.
To be honest with you, I didn't even know that was part of it.
That's part of it. You
Wow.
know, as a state representative, you know, I get paid 2 years in advance. My check last year for my term after taxes was $140.
Yeah.
That quickly went to my church as a donation.
Yeah.
And I get nothing but mileage going back and forth to Concord. And you know what? I like that.
Do you get tolls too, or they just wave
give
through?
They give you a little transponder, and they
that's
also give you a license plate.
Pretty fancy.
Pretty fancy. I get my $16 every time, or whatever that amount is, to go to Concord to do the people's business. But being on Ways and Means, I'm up there 3-4 days a week, and I'm happy to do it. Proud to do it, Matt. Thanks.
Does being in office already as a state rep, does that help you sort of mitigate what I think some voters probably have, because we are such a partisan, we're so partisan in this country, and I realize too that when you get down to smaller local government, city government, that partisanship probably means a lot less, but it's always there in people's attitudes, and I'm wondering, being that you're already a state rep, that proves that you're electable. So I wonder, does that help you in the sense of sort of proving to people, yeah, I'm more of an independent, even though I'm with the, I call myself a Republican, but look, I'm already, people have already chosen me to represent them in Concord. So does that help, do you think?
It sure does. And, if I'm on the outside looking in, and I look at the totality of what's going on in Manchester now, I say to myself, okay, I've got a lot of new people who haven't done anything. What I did is I had a plan. I wanted to work as a ballot inspector in the ward. Then I wanted to become the moderator. So I got to know people, talk to people, understand the election system,
right?
Understand your ward. And that 2-year period when I got to know people was very, very educational.
Yeah.
And, as I continued to move forward, I ran for the House. I didn't win that first time, but I always know when you run, you may not win, and that's okay. You get your name out.
Sure.
But in my ward now, as a state representative, I'm fairly confident. I'm able to pull Democratic and Republican and independent votes because you know what? I have common sense. I'm going to give you an example of a bill that my party may have had an issue with, and I was the compromise here. As Ways and Means, there was a fee increase of $5 to the marriage license fee, and that was going to go to some matching funds for domestic violence abuse. And of course, the Republican Party doesn't like to raise any fees, taxes or fees.
Right.
You know, but let's be realistic here. All right, $5,
Yeah.
$10, whatever that. No, okay. When you're talking that kind of money on a fee that hasn't been changed since 1982, I believe was the date.
Right.
All right. So I said, listen, I'm not opposed to supporting a $5 increase because there's some money that's going to be there, matching funds that will go to domestic violence, and I saw that need. So I did not have a problem siding with the Democrats and saying, you know what, this is a reasonable compromise. It's $5.
Sure.
We get the increase, you get the funds. This is a really feel good.
Right.
It did pass.
Yeah.
So the majority passed it. The governor signed it. But that was an example of me working as the Republican, knowing what the right thing here was to do and just to talk to people.
Well, not only that, though, but in a case like that, had you voted against it, then you would be at risk of people, of political opponents in the future smearing you with, oh, he doesn't think it's important to have funding to prevent or address domestic violence because he voted against this.
Sure. So I'm cognizant of the fact that people are always going to try to roast you. Mm-hmm. I get it.
Oh, yeah.
However, I try to operate on common sense all the time. If
Yeah.
I make a mistake, I'm not afraid. I'm one of those politicians that if I messed up, I'll say I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You know, I have that in my vernacular. I'm allowed to say I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
But so when I do something, I don't look at, well, how's this going to be for a vote? How's this look? Listen, I endorsed Joyce Craig, the Democrat, for mayor. Joyce is from my ward. Mm-hmm. Joyce is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I think Joyce will do a fine job as a mayor. I believe she will be our next mayor. And I believe that she's worked really hard to get there. Mm-hmm. I took it on the chin from some of the people on the further right of my party.
Yeah, yeah.
How dare you? How could you? Guess what? Number one, I'm myself. I'm my own person. Number two, you're not even my constituent, and you're calling me that. Now, keep in mind, my constituents are happy that I'm doing this.
Right.
Because they know Joyce like I know
Right.
Joyce. But when I have people tell me you're doomed, you're never going to get elected again, and you know my answer to that is, that's okay.
Yeah.
I've done the right thing right now. And when it all works out and the people see we're better off now than we were, it's okay.
Right.
I don't always operate as trying to, well, if I vote this way, I might not get reelected. I know some people do it. It's not my MO.
Well, what about in the New Hampshire State Legislature? Do you find yourself in that same situation where you're, because of how you vote or what you believe on a particular issue, that you're taking it on the chin from? Because it's such an interesting dynamic in New Hampshire, where the Republican Party, you've got all these different factions.
Correct. One thing, there is one thing I learned in the legislature is the Democratic Party votes in block.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, there. And listen, I'm not putting anybody down, but it's just, I think for myself, I make my own votes. The night before I have to vote, I don't look for somebody to tell me how to vote.
Right.
I look for how I should vote. And we do have our caucuses, and we talk, but my caucus on the Republican side is a little more split. We have a really right part of the caucus, we have a libertarian part of the caucus, and we have a pretty liberal left caucus.
Yeah.
Getting them all together on the same page is never easy. But the Democrats, they're always easy. It's always, we'll just do what my master says. That's concerning to me.
Right.
And working with the Democrats the last year or so, I'm seeing more and more willingness to realizing we can't be on the extreme fringes. So.
Yeah. There's a term, I don't use it so much lately, but I have an acronym, PIG, which is partisan ideological groupthink. And I think what you described is an example of that with the Democrats, and on the national level too. I mean, I think you see it with both parties, but it is an unusual dynamic in New Hampshire, and there may be other states where it's a similar dynamic, where you have a Republican Party, or perhaps in some states the Democratic Party is similar. But although I suspect not, I think it's probably healthy for the Republican Party to have. It's not always politically the best thing in some instances, but I think it's probably ideologically, intellectually, it's probably healthy to have these sort of debates within the party itself.
I'll tell you, it helps me.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I like to hear the argument. What does that extreme right really feel about this, and why? More importantly, it's not how do they feel, because 9 times out of 10, you know what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Why?
Right.
What's the motivation?
Yeah.
What is the motivation? And, you know, the press sometimes you say, oh, it's money, it's this, it's votes, it's that. It's not always that. Sometimes it's pure ideology.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I'm not into that. For me, that's just not my gig.
You seem like more of a pragmatist, a practical pragmatist, as opposed to an ideologue.
Ideologues are not going to get our stuff done that we need to get done in the city and the state right now.
Right.
I think pragmatists, folks who want to work together for the common good of all, not one group, not a specific group, I think are going to fare better. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying sell the farm. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying, hey, let's just forget about our principles and just, whatever it takes. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But you can do it smart. When you got people on the left and the right to get together and they have the same common goal at the end, should be able to find a way to get there. Should be able to.
Right. So talk to me a little bit more about the medical marijuana. You said you were behind that.
Yeah. As I'm a disabled veteran,
okay.
I got injured in the military, and I retired from federal service, had some back surgery. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that we have a heroin epidemic here. And if you look at 35 to 40% of these heroin addicts, you'll look to see that most of them started on an opioid medication.
I didn't know it was that high, that percentage.
It's pretty high.
Wow. Okay.
They start off, and what happens is you get your tolerance, it gets expensive, and you can buy the black market. So as I continue to read and research marijuana, it's just unbelievable prohibition, what was done in the 30s, why it was done, why did we outlaw marijuana to begin with. I mean, you start really digging into it.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about money.
It's only called marijuana because they wanted it to sound,
Correct. I usually
exotic.
I usually try to call it cannabis all the time I can.
Yeah.
And the actual the name of the law for New Hampshire is the therapeutic use of cannabis law.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to do this term, because I'm such a firm believer in the medical marijuana. Anytime you can keep people off opioids, it's a beautiful thing. And I have a bill in right now with quite a bit of support to add post-traumatic stress disorder for veterans or people who might be in a domestic violence situation or whoever might have a traumatic experience. Research shows that cannabis can help PTSD. Another near and dear issue to me is decriminalization of marijuana.
Absolutely.
Representative Adam Schrader and myself came within a vote last year in the Senate of making it happen.
One vote?
We were. I mean, literally, we're close. I made some deals with some senators. They kept their word, and it was politics at its best. I had a senator who really knew nothing about the issue, asked me a few questions, and say they'd consider it, and they voted in favor it first time ever.
Yeah.
So, we're on the brink of it, but here's the reason. And listen, it's important for folks to realize legalization and decriminalization are two different beasts.
Right.
Decriminalization just means you're not going to go to jail for personal use.
Right.
Legalization is tax and regulate like alcohol.
Right.
That's a discussion for another day, and I'm not opposed to that, but that's not something we're ready for yet.
Yeah.
However, we need to be cognizant of the fact that we have Vermont about 30 seconds away from becoming legalized, and they will be in 2016, and from all indications. And if you look at Massachusetts and Maine, they have referendums going on in 2016 to legalize and tax.
And they already have decrim, right? Aren't we the only New England state that hasn't decrimmed yet?
We are the island.
Yeah, which is remarkable.
I think Maine decrimmed in 1976. Now let's talk.
I didn't know that. Really?
They were very, very smart.
I had no idea.
Let's talk. What does decrim mean? So, our original bill was if you had an ounce or less of marijuana, that's considered personal use, and you are caught, you would be given a violation, a ticket, a speeding ticket.
Sure.
Could have been a $100 fine, $300 fine. We were kind of toying with what to do. The other side said, well, maybe the second offense should be misdemeanor.
Yeah.
I wasn't so keen with that. How about the second? Let's make the state some money. I mean, come on, let's call it for what it is.
Sure.
These people are going to use it no matter what.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
So instead
absolutely.
of spending money to send them to jail and put them through the court system, give them a fine.
Yeah.
Now there's some other parts of this law that says, diverting, or that doesn't count. This is just straight decrim.
Yeah.
The governor wanted to drop it to a quarter an ounce. I think we were going to settle on a half an ounce. And long story short, the Senate tabled it because they didn't think they had the vote necessary to make it carry.
Yeah.
But I believe finally, the Senate and our governor want some sort of decriminalization. We need to get these small towns to stop arresting people with the joint. I'm not saying people are driving under the influence. I'm talking about just somebody has a joint or a small amount. Give them a ticket, move on.
Yeah.
Why do we need to block up the criminal justice system?
Absolutely,
Take
yeah.
a lawyer, which might be a pro bono lawyer because they can't afford it, and then the court system that's already they're already overfilled. I mean,
Right.
they're already working their tail off, and then our prisons are overcrowded.
Yeah, with
Why?
nonviolent drug offenders.
Come on, why?
Yeah.
So that's the method behind that madness. And the House overwhelmingly, I want to say there was only 70 votes out of the 400 that said no, they didn't want this.
Wow,
So
okay.
New Hampshire overwhelmingly. I mean, the House of Representatives is a very good indication of what New Hampshire's thinking,
Right,
Because we
right.
represent so few people.
Yeah.
That I think. Knock on wood, I think this year is the year that we're going to decriminalize, finally, marijuana possession.
Well, what's the obstacle? Because I mean, I assume a lot of it's just ignorance, right? You still have these people who assume that one day you smoke a joint and then the next day you're shooting heroin, and that's because that's just how it works, which is ridiculous. But I think there are people who believe that. I also know that I don't know if this is the case in New Hampshire, and I haven't heard of this here. I know that in some states, though, you have the private prison lobby that is always pushing to keep the laws intact because private prisons, they depend on those inmates who really
Sure.
to them are customers in a sense. And really, it's the state that's the customer, and maybe the prisoners are product, however you want to think of it. But what has been the greatest impediments here in New Hampshire to this?
Well, it's not the first one. It's not there are a certain element of people out there that just don't understand cannabis.
Yeah,
And that's fine. There's a lot of research out there now.
yeah,
The biggest fight has been the Police Chiefs Association.
okay,
The self-sustaining prophecy. Why would I want to give up a law that allows me to hire more people,
right,
to arrest more people, to get into the court system, and to take care of my fellow corrections officers out there?
always follow the money. If something doesn't make sense,
If you look at who is fighting this decriminalization or any of the medical marijuana, it's the lovely police chief out of Franklin and a couple others that just go up there in uniform and start spewing hate.
yeah,
That's something that needs to be dealt with later.
yeah,
But, it's one thing to spew your side or opinion, but when you start misrepresenting the facts, and because you have a badge on and you have a gun,
right.
you're an authority figure and people believe what you say,
Right, yeah.
but they're full of it,
right.
and
Yeah.
and really behind it all is
Yeah.
the fact that they don't want to give that up because they want the war on drugs to continue. $1 billion we've spent. $1 billion on the war of drugs. Epic fail.
Absolutely. How much of it too is just because so many people seem to believe that once you legalize or decriminalize in this case, if you even do that, then all of a sudden everybody's going to be doing this. And to me, and you had made the comment earlier, people are going to do it whether it's legal or not. And I always tell people, if I myself am not predisposed to doing something illegal and you legalize it, that doesn't mean I'm going to go out and do it if I wasn't interested in doing it to begin with. But so many people seem to think that once you legalize something, and I kind of understand the logic behind, in the one sense they say, well, that sends a message to the youth that, well, if it's legal, then it's okay. But the problem with that is, of course, that would suggest then that alcohol being legal, just by virtue of it being legal, means that we're telling America's children, well, it's legal, so therefore it's okay. But we have laws in place that say, no, it's not okay. And those get violated too, of course. You have underage drinking. But, I mean, do you run into that a lot? Just this idea people have in their heads that, well, if you decriminalize it, everyone's going to be stoned.
Very good. I don't get faced with that too often. But
That's
what
good.
I do get, I want you to come up and testify because you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Think about this. Today, in today's world, it is easier for a 16-year-old kid to get a joint than it is a beer. Mm-hmm. How come? Because the beer's illegal,
Right.
and there are processes in place to sell this drug. I don't care what you want to call it.
Right.
Alcohol's a drug.
Right.
We tax it, regulate it, and we have the rules.
Yeah.
The kids can't buy it, right? Every kid can get a hold of marijuana.
Sure.
So that just goes exactly to what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it. We're not going to do it. Maybe we'll do it. But when you make it hard for somebody to get it or make it romantic to get it, the curiosity's there.
Absolutely.
If it's decriminalized, mom and dad doing their job, or mom or dad or whoever's taking care of that child has a conversation with their kid. You don't want kids smoking at 16. That's not what we're talking about. Medicinal marijuana and 21 and over decriminalization.
Right.
And I just think it's a very interesting conversation to have. When a kid can get a joint easier than a beer, what's the problem?
Now, why 21 and over and not 18 and over? Is it because alcohol is 21 and over, so it's just easier for people to digest it?
I got to be honest with you, it's easier for people to digest it. I think
Yeah.
if legalization was ever to go forward, I think it would be 21 as well.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think, though? I mean, obviously, ultimately, you have to do what's going to work in order to get it done. But would you, if there were a shot at making it 18 and over, would you support that?
I would have to think about that, and I'll tell you why. Here's my concern. One half of me says, when I was 18, I joined the military. I was given a gun, and we were in the Gulf. I was during the Gulf War period.
Right.
I could have died
Yeah.
if I would have got deployed over there, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I should have the ability to do that if I wanted to. I couldn't drink at 18, by the way, in the military.
Right.
So one half of me says, well, that probably makes sense, 18. The other half of me says, well, we got a lot of kids out of high school, in college, 18 to 21. Maybe we're adding an element. We don't allow alcohol in college, right, for the most part, until you're 21. Why would you want to? I'm looking at it more of a hindrance than a help.
Sure.
So would I consider it? Yes. Would I side for? I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about that. The libertarian in me says 18.
Right.
18.
Yeah.
The common sense part of me says maybe we ought to think just like alcohol.
Yeah. Interesting.
And at what point does somebody say, and I'm shooting holes in my own argument. At what point does a kid say, well, hey, you only got to be 18 to smoke marijuana, but 21 for alcohol, so weed's safer? Well, you and I know that cannabis is safer.
Right.
But maybe the kid doesn't need to find out at 18.
Right.
They probably already found out anyway.
Yeah.
However, so that's my mentality there.
That's another, too. You touched on another misconception about cannabis is that some people, because it's closely associated in terms of the law with actual hard drugs, they assume that cannabis itself must be more dangerous than alcohol.
Right.
When obviously it's not. No one's ever died from cannabis that I know of.
I agree. None of my research. Now, I'm not saying somebody hasn't died from driving a car or jumping or whatever they might do, but the actual drug itself, it's not going to kill you.
Right.
And you're not going to have side effects from not taking it.
Right.
Whereas if you're a heroin addict, you start going into, the shakes and
right. Oh, absolutely.
Whereas marijuana, you don't.
Yeah, and alcohol, more dangerous too, because not only is there the risk, you've got the obvious risks of driving impaired and whatnot, which I suppose you might have with marijuana as well, potentially, or cannabis. But what you don't have with cannabis is, I've never been at a bar at closing time and seen a fight break out because people have been using cannabis. I've seen fights break out because people have been using alcohol, and
Right.
something gets out of hand. But cannabis certainly doesn't. I mean, it sounds funny to say it this way, but I think it's a valid thing to wonder about. If there were more cannabis use, would there be less violence in society in the macro? Because cannabis certainly doesn't make anyone violent. If anything, it tends to make them more docile.
So,
Would we have less crime?
my research would indicate that the studies would show yes.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a certain amount of people out there that if they were given the opportunity to take care of their pain via cannabis versus alcohol, because there is a
Right.
certain amount of people out there that won't touch an opioid.
Absolutely.
We've all been there. We've all had too much to drink before, and we know what happens when people drink too much. Other than hitting the McDonald's 4 times, if you're hitting cannabis, I'm not seeing a lot of fights. I'm not
Right.
seeing. I maybe a fight over the Krispy Kreme donut
Right.
that's sitting there, but I just it's so much different, and I think
Yeah.
you're right. And maybe the atmosphere eventually will change.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be cannabis rooms instead of a bar.
Right, yeah, yeah.
I think as we evolve, and I think as society starts realizing what happened in the 30s with Prohibition, how it happened, why it happened. See, we're pretty smart now. We're pretty savvy right now. We know we're getting duped, and we were duped pretty good.
Absolutely, absolutely. How much of this, when you're making these arguments with people who are on the other side of this issue, do you use data from, say, Colorado and other places to kind of back this up?
Yes, yeah. To answer your question, yes. And keep in mind, this isn't legalization, so
Right.
we go to the other 23 states that have the medical marijuana portion, or at least the medical legalized.
Yeah.
As we're going in front of the Health and Human Services Committee, and when I've got an idea for a bill or a bill proposal, and you've got your certain people that have questions no matter what, and you do use those studies. And I
Yeah.
found that the Marijuana Policy Project out of Washington, they've been a great help.
Yeah, we've had Matt Simon on the show.
Matt's a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And without their help, I'm not sure how successful we'd be.
Yeah.
We've got the normal group also.
Oh yes. Yep.
Erica Golter, she's wonderful as well. It's getting those studies and being able to show, when I go into Health and Human Services, we want to add post-traumatic stress disorder. The history on that is in 2013, the governor stripped PTSD out of the language of the bill. It was supposed to originally be in that bill.
See, I didn't even realize that until you
Yeah.
mentioned it. I didn't know that it was taken out.
It was taken out.
I just assumed all of this time that it was a part of it. Do you know why? Like, what was the reason? That's bizarre.
I'm going to go on a limb here, and there just wasn't enough scientific evidence or research on it. And keep in mind, because it's a Schedule I drug, and that's really the whole problem here. For the folks listening, Schedule I is absolutely the FDA. The federal government will schedule our drugs 1, 2, 3, or 4. Schedule I drug, meaning, is the most dangerous, and they have no medical value. Marijuana is Schedule I, and so isn't heroin. That's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, and because it's a Schedule I, you can't study it.
Right.
So here we are. We've got 23 states trying to pass medical marijuana legalization, decriminalization, but we don't have access to any real studies. Although I will tell you, the VA is starting to produce studies now on PTSD in veterans and showing that it's working.
Good.
There are studies from Canada. There are studies from some other countries that are of very much worth value.
Yeah.
So those are what I'll use.
Yeah.
And use it with a grain of salt, and you just have people realize that this is a forgotten plant that was banned back in the day because for fear and money.
Right.
The pharmaceutical. Why would you want to take one plant for 10 problems when you can take 10 pills for one problem?
Like
really,
I say, always follow the money.
Follow the money.
Absolutely.
So.
Has the pharmaceutical lobby been involved in New Hampshire in stonewalling this? I know they are in D.C., of course, but.
I'm sure D.C.
Yeah.
And I just saw some legislation that just went forward in the House on the Washington side to allow to get the feds out of enforcing states that have agreed to medical marijuana laws. And that looks like that might get some feet.
Yeah.
Not a huge Obama fan, but if Obama wants to really make his legacy, the best thing he could do right now is with the stroke of that pen. Remember, he said he's got pen and paper, right?
Right.
Stroke that pen and paper, do an executive order making marijuana a Schedule 3 drug instead of a Schedule 1.
That would be remarkable. But, and I have a lot of mixed feelings about Obama myself, but he's in the problem, though, is he as soon as he does that, then he's got the entire Republican Party pointing at him and going, see, he thinks he's an emperor. He thinks he can just make laws, and he can't. The executive branch isn't supposed to have any power.
This might be the one I could look the other way on.
Yeah.
But at what an executive order is meant for if you're going to move a schedule. I think that is more of an administrative action than actually making the law itself. So,
absolutely.
I really think the president should take at least to a Schedule 2.
Yeah,
we can research it. We've got these universities that are ready to go. Right. Let's research it.
Right.
There's money to be made in this sector.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Legit money and legit taxes to be taken.
Does it on some level, just kind of a gut level, frustrate you at all that we need all... I mean, obviously it's valuable to have the studies and the research and et cetera to bolster your argument, but on some level, don't you kind of go, it's just frustrating that we need all this when really just kind of basic common sense will tell you that this is where we need to go with this. You don't really need all this additional information just to prove to somebody who doesn't get it. That's got to be frustrating. It frustrates me.
It is frustrating. However, once you do all that work,
yeah,
and I had 9 bills that were successful. When you do that work and you get that yes vote out of there, and you've known that you have made a difference to somebody didn't know how to vote on this.
Right.
And your information you provided allowed them to vote yes in a good conscience. You feel good. You feel good leaving there.
Yeah.
Then you go to the next chamber, and then you do your best there.
Yeah.
The Senate's much different than the House.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So where are we in terms of now in New Hampshire? So medical marijuana passed, but from what everyone says, it's difficult to actually use it.
I was the gentleman who sued the state last year for access to medical marijuana cards.
Okay.
The 2013 law was written it was intended, the intention of the legislature was for them to issue cards right away and an affirmative defense. So that would give them time. If you got caught with it, then you'd have I've got my card. And
right,
I'm
right.
Illegal. Well, the governor decided to go with the attorney general for an opinion.
Okay.
Well, hold on. The HHS went to the attorney.
Health and Human Services. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
And the attorney general said, absolutely not. They decided what our intent was.
Yeah.
Now, I wasn't in the legislature at that time, but I know a lot about this bill.
Yeah.
And they determined what our intent was because they can.
Right.
And they advise against giving the cards out.
Wow.
So I had contacted my attorney, and we filed an original petition, and 2 weeks after we filed, the ATCs miraculously were announced. That was step 1 of the process. So we had to amend the complaint, and everything's moving forward pretty quickly right now. So to be honest with you, my work is done here. I kind of moved it.
That's good.
So, and hats off to attorney Brandon Ross, by the way. He did a good job.
You say so 23 other states have
I believe it's 23 now either have legalized or access to medically to cannabis. I
Okay.
think 23 is that number right now.
Do you know where we are as far as decrim nationally? Do you know how many states have gone for decrim?
Oh, that's a great question. Way more than 23.
Yeah.
I mean, I was in Boston. I was at a Fenway Park concert, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, and I saw somebody smoking marijuana next to a cop, and I'm saying to myself, huh? Well, they decriminalized it in Boston. It's
Right.
a ticket.
Right.
And I had talked to the guy, I used to be a cop, so I said,
Yeah.
what? I didn't get what was going on. You know, I'm in New Hampshire, Reefer Madness, New Hampshire. You never see that stuff.
Right.
And he goes,
Right.
he goes, welcome to Boston. It's decriminalized. I'm not wasting my time to write a ticket.
Well, that's what I've heard too. Is that there's a lot of folks who would say, well, decrim. I mean, you made a pretty clear distinction between decrim and legalization, but there's also, it would seem to me, a sameness in one regard, in that what I've been hearing, and I don't know if this is true in other states, but I've been hearing this a lot in Massachusetts, that the police are, now that it is just a fine, it's a ticket, in most cases they're just not really bothering. So it's almost like it becomes a sort of a de facto legalization, which I don't think is a bad thing. But I mean,
you and I can agree on that it probably isn't a bad thing. However, if we decriminalize and a police officer were to see that and has the ability to write a ticket for $100, and I'm not saying take the authority out of the police to give a warning, because you always want that. I mean, I
Right.
loved my ability as a police officer. I truly believe a warning for the right person does more than a ticket.
right.
So you never want to take that away. But God, I hope that officer, if we decriminalize and is in a position that they need to write that ticket, they need to write that ticket.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's just kind of, because the guy who's standing next to the car just smoking, he's kind of
Because then it turns into a California type situation. Now it's at every corner. That's not what I think New Hampshire's about.
Now, is that, I don't know much about this, but I've heard a little bit about what's been going on in California. So is that really, can you expand on that a little bit as far as the California situation?
Well, I guess where I'm going with the California situation is you look at every corner, street corner, and there's a pot shop.
Really? Wow.
There are cannabis shops everywhere.
Yeah.
My sister lives in Colorado, and we go to Denver. You see them there, but it's a little less... you don't have a big marijuana cannabis leaf in the in the
Right.
window and the sign,
Right.
And frankly, and I'm sure New Hampshire would never turn into that type of atmosphere.
hard
as
to
well.
imagine.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, this still is a granite state, and we still love our heritage.
Right.
Things change, and we can make change as we go forward, but. I don't think we want to completely take our whole landscape and change it.
Right, right. To shift gears a little bit, so you're a former police officer?
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts on, there's, we've seen across the country, of course, these instances of police maybe getting out of control, depending on your perspective, and it's hard to know how much of that has always gone on to some extent, and how much of it how much of it is just it coming to the forefront more because we live in this age where with social media and everything, anybody can take a video of anything and throw it up online, and then you're seeing it. So it's hard to know. Really, there's no way to know if it's something that's gotten worse, or maybe it's, who knows, maybe it's something that's actually gotten better. But we're just seeing more of it now,
right.
Because of the internet age that we live in. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I always operate under the assumption that police work, it's like any profession. You've got people who are great. You're going to have some bad apples in there too. And this is a part that I think some people misses, and then you've got all shades of gray. You may have someone who's basically a good police officer, but maybe they have a little bit of a bad attitude, for example, because I assume you get kind of jaded, or some folks get kind of jaded in that line of work. I mean, I'd be curious to get your perspective on all this.
A couple of things. That's a very good point with everything that's going on, and I think it's always happened, and I think you're right. I think the advent of cell phones and video cameras.
Oh, yeah. Everybody's walking around with a video camera.
I've had my fair share of run-ins with people over the 10 years, and, you treat people the way you want to be treated, and frankly, it usually goes pretty well.
Yeah.
It's the drunk person. It's to go into the domestic violence call, and you get prepared. You know, you need to be prepared for a weapon, and you need to be prepared for the worst outcome. You know, there's a bill retained right now in our Criminal Justice Committee. A representative, I think Tasker, out of
Kyle Tasker.
Kyle Tasker filed a body camera bill to allow police departments to authorize body cameras to be used as a best practice. You know, we didn't have body cameras, but I could tell you 95% of the cops, actually, let me go, 99% of the cops are good.
Yeah.
You're going to have your bad egg. You're going to have them everywhere.
Sure, sure.
Why not tape it all?
Right, because ultimately...
It protects me.
Exactly.
Protects me.
Exactly, yeah.
As a police officer, I know how I conducted myself. I know what I could do constitutionally and policy-wise and what I couldn't do. But I did not have a camera, so it was my word against the other person's word.
Right.
Now, if I'm the professional and I have a camera on, what did you say? Well, no, let's talk about who hit who or what happened, or, you know, here's the film.
Right.
It's pretty hard to, you know, dispute. And that goes on the same line for the bad cop, for the rogue cop. You know, if there is a shooting incident or there is a beating incident or some sort of improper conduct, have it on tape.
Yeah, absolutely. So you were an officer. Were you an officer in Manchester?
I was in Bedford.
You were in Bedford. Okay.
Yeah, I did that for about 10 years part-time. When I got out of the military, I wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
That was my little boy. I just wanted that's all I ever wanted to do.
Really? Yeah.
So I came out. It was a tough economy when I had gotten out. It was the early 90s.
Okay.
And there just wasn't a lot of jobs to be had.
Yeah.
I finally had gotten hired in Bedford, and at the same time I got hired at the Postal Service.
Okay.
And I was already a former federal employee, so, I mean, you start out with 4 weeks vacation. You get all that back, you know?
Yeah.
And starting out at a higher rate, it was like $15,000 higher at the time.
Oh, no kidding.
And I had just gotten married, and I said, I'm sorry, you know, I can't. I'm going to be working for the Postal Service. And this, why don't you stay on part-time?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Like 10 years. 10
no
years.
Kidding.
And they didn't really hire part-timers. I went to all the training, went to police academy. Anytime the full-timers had training there, I was involved. I had my own car, my own sector, my own calls. I got treated as if I was a full-time officer. Worked Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sundays.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is. That's a good gig.
Yeah.
I wonder if, does some of your history as a police officer, I wonder if that kind of informs your thoughts on decriminalizing marijuana, because it would seem to me that there's probably, and they probably don't say it because it's probably just not a good idea for them to say it, active police officers, but I assume there's some police officers out there who feel like it would be so much better if we could devote our time and resources to, you know, solving actual crime like burglaries and murders and rapes and all this, and not having to waste time, you know, locking somebody up for smoking a joint.
You know, I think you'd find if you talk to the rank and file police officers, rank and file, I was one of them.
Yeah.
They'll tell you, we don't want to be bothered with me. Now, I'm not talking dealers. I'm not talking big time.
That's different. Yeah.
I'm talking Fred with a joint in his pocket who just forgot to pull it out from the party, and you know what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah.
No, it's a lot of paperwork for nothing. I mean, really. We've got a heroin epidemic going on now.
Yeah.
I'm hoping Manchester's not spending their time on Fred who forgot his. And actually, you know what? I know they're not.
Yeah.
We've got more important things to do.
You're safe for now, Fred.
That's right, Fred. You're safe for now. And we're working hard to get you safe. But, you know, I think the chief may have a different view on it. But my guess is I've had a chance to speak to Police Chief Willard a couple of times now, and he knows how I'm for the drug court, and we need access for these folks who are addicted to heroin, and he's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. I'm pretty impressed with talking to the police chief of Manchester, Willard.
That's good.
And
he's relatively new in the job.
He's relatively new. He's been everywhere.
Really?
Everywhere I turn, he's there.
Yeah.
That's good. And that's good. And I had heard this. Somebody said he wants to wear his blue uniform instead of the white chief.
Oh, really?
He wants to be one of the guys and gals.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Good for him.
Yeah.
So,
That
Chief,
is good.
keep at it. You're doing a good job.
Is there any hope for the drug court? Because last time it didn't quite make it.
I think you're going to see an announcement involving myself next week, and I'll
Good.
leave it at that.
Oh.
I'll leave it at that way.
Breaking news. Well, sort
You're
of.
going to see
You're-
a pretty
you're
good announcement.
Hinting, so a breaking hint.
Tuesday at 10. But who's
Oh, good.
so you'll see something.
That's fantastic. That's good to know.
That's top. That's where my head is, and that's what we're trying to get the drug court. I support the drug court.
Yeah.
For the folks following, I endorse Joyce Craig. I have nothing against Mayor Gatsis. Mayor Gatsis is right on this one. So isn't Joyce, by the way. Joyce wants a drug court.
Okay.
But I went to the delegation, Hillsborough, and I got up and spoke in favor for, and I wasn't sure we were going to get the votes. I had to ask for a roll call vote.
Yeah.
No, they had to take a vote to do the roll call. You have to take a roll call for the roll call.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to be on record.
Wow.
See, I'm
really?
not big on that. I love roll call votes.
Yeah. Accountability.
Accountability. And, transparency. It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah. A lot of folks don't like that.
Right. Well, I do.
That's good for you. That's excellent. So, do you plan to? And we're almost out of time, but I mean, do you have a bigger plan in terms of your political career? Do you want to eventually run for the House or Senate, the U.S. House or Senate?
No, I got to be honest with you. No, I don't. And I've been asked that a couple of times now. I'm very fortunate to have been elected to the state representative job last year. I knew I was missing the city piece, and that's why I'm running for school board.
Yeah.
And now's the time for change on the school board.
Yeah.
And even if it's 1 or 2 terms to get some change through, need some new blood, some new faces in there. But I'm very fortunate that I was assigned to Ways and Means. I'm in a ward that appreciates my service and my constituent work. People call me, I'm there.
Yeah.
And you know who you are, Ward 1, and I'm continuing to work hard for you. I like my position at the House. I got to be
Yeah.
honest with you. I've done a lot of different things in my life. Army, I've taught, the $140 every 2-year job, a state representative, is the best job I've ever had.
No kidding.
So I plan on staying in the House. I'd like to stay here locally
Yeah.
and stay in the House, and that's where I'm at right now.
Could run for state senate.
I could, but
Stay
you know
local,
what?
But you know.
I'm happy.
Yeah.
No, if
that's
I
great,
can, if
yeah.
I can affect change at what I'm doing now, my head isn't always for the bigger job.
Sure.
And
That's
being
good.
on Ways and Means, I can make some changes.
By the way, what is that for those who don't know? What is the Ways and Means Committee?
Thank you. Anything that comes into the state bills that would include taxes, fee adjustments, any type of income that the state might make from a program,
Yeah.
taxing or fees, has to come through us. So we get bills, everything from casinos to legalization of marijuana, because it's all tax related.
Okay.
The marriage license fee, the fee increase has to go through Ways and Means.
Right,
So,
okay.
And that's why we're up there so often. We've got a lot of big, heavy hitting bills.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of bills.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, thank you for the question. It basically is just incoming revenue,
Okay.
and finance is outgoing.
Right.
They look, okay, you got X dollars, and this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So think of it incoming and outgoing.
Have you always been on that committee?
This is my first term, and this is the
Oh,
only
okay.
committee I've ever been assigned to.
Yeah, no, that's-
Very lucky as a freshman to be put on this committee.
Yeah, because it sounds like not to downplay any of the other committees, but obviously Ways and Means is extremely important, probably more than say Fish and Game or something.
Sure.
And again, not to
And every
not that
committee
Fish
is
and Game
important.
Right.
Every committee is. The difference is the amount of work we do.
Yeah.
And the different type of work we do. And
Yeah.
I have the time. I can. If I still had a full-time job, it'd be a hard time.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how anybody could do it.
Right.
But I have the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Honorable Joe LaChance, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
being here with us.
I
This
appreciate
This
it.
has been awesome. It was a nice surprise. John Hopwood texted me and said Joe LaChance wants to stick around if you'll have him. I said, great.
Thanks.
So-
And if I could just plug the school
Oh,
board.
please do. Yeah, absolutely.
Folks, this is a very tough race coming up on November 3rd. I'm asking for your vote. I am Joseph LaChance. I'm running for school board at large. There's 4 people running for 2 jobs. Out with the old, in with the new. If you're comfortable with what's going on in the school and you've been comfortable with what they've been doing, then elect the same people that you've had in there. However, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to make change. I'm going to champion change. And I'm motivated. Manchester, I ask for your vote. Please vote Joseph LaChance, school board at large. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to vote for you. I'm going to endorse you right now.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem. Happy to do it. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget the radio edition of Unleashed, 5 nights a week on IPM Nation. And we'll actually replay the audio from this tonight on the radio show. So you get a double dose there.
Love it. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you all for watching. And if you're watching live on Wednesday, I'll be back at 6 with Gary. Thanks, everybody. Talk at you later.